What's going on, everybody? This is Amit, again for another episode of Origin Junctions. Just to catch up people who haven't done this before or haven't been a part of our experience before, it's a fairly new experience, and what we're trying to get at, or what I'm trying to get at, is the origins, the root causes, why people do what they do, and how people have gotten to where they've gotten. Not so curious or not so interested in the current destination or what the destination will be or the current place that people are residing, but more why. Whether by random chance, life experience, etc. So, with that being said, today the person we're speaking with is a gentleman named Sammy Simpson. Sammy is somebody who I had the pleasure of working with for a while in my past career. He has had an interesting past that has gotten him to this point, and we'll talk more with Sammy about that right now. With that, I'll introduce you to Sammy Simpson. Here you go. What's up, Sammy?
How are you? Good to talk to you, Amit.
Much appreciated. Thanks for the time. As you can see, Sammy and I are both wearing warmest clothes. New York got a little bit colder today than we were planning on. So, and he's got to go out and deal with the elements in a little bit. So I won't take up too much of his time. But with that being said, the real reason I want to talk to Sammy is his background is interesting. From North Carolina, was a radio host, worked in radio, et cetera, and now he works in essence as an exec in a film and TV payroll company, which is not along the path you would expect. So I'll let Sammy just kind of expound on, I guess, the start to where you're at. Just a quick little one-off on what makes you you.
Sure. And I thank you, by the way, for having me. I'm really excited to be talking to you. For me, I think that what you said is a great point. Is that there was no straight line for success. There was no. A lot of kind of what happened in my career was very much at the notion of kind of following a passion, following my strengths, and kind of seeing where it kind of took me, which kind of put me in a lot of interesting roles. Because I think if someone would have told me 20 years ago, hey, today you're going to be working for essentially an entertainment finance company doing the work that I'm doing on a daily basis, I would have probably laughed and said, there's no way. But I think, when you kind of drill down a little further, you talk about the why of things. I think when you look at the why of my strengths of ideation, my strength of marketing and strategy and branding, and my own kind of quest of looking for the why in everything, it makes perfect sense. So I think it's just a matter of the way that you frame it, the context of the whole conversation, that I didn't get so caught up in the role as much I got caught up in the journey of following my passion. And I allowed, the universe, so to speak, to kind of take me in some pretty interesting directions.
Well, that kind of actually touches on the things I want to discuss with you more than most is, so you have this, were you always this passionate a person? Like, for example, and this come up before in many conversations I've had with people, whereby people, you're kind of told a path, or you've been taught a path from birth till your adulthood or whatever, by way of there is a standard way that we in the U.S. garner wealth, success, et cetera, by education in school, by university, by et cetera. And the idea of passion, it's weird. We don't give love to people who are passionate when they're going for it as much, but yet when somebody is successful via their passion, i.e., actor X, then
Yeah.
we praise that person. But until they've gotten there, we go, hey, that's pretty stupid. What are you doing? So why would you follow a passionate path, or what in you did somebody motivate you that way? Why did passion kind of triumph over status quo?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I think it's a question that is probably going to be different for every single person, which you're probably already identifying in this great kind of program that you're putting together here. But for me, I think it was very much. I think it typically comes from very early influence, right? For most of us, is I had a mother that said, "You can do anything you put your mind to," and I think I really bought into that very early on, and there was probably a lot that was already within me that really struck a nerve, so to speak. I know for others, they that I meet on a day in, day out basis, they may say, my parents, my uncle, my such and such wanted me to be a doctor my whole life, so they followed that path, or an educator, or an attorney, or whatever it may be. So I think a lot of times, as with anything, is that we have a lot of outside influence that have very good intentions for us, great love for us, that want to kind of help steer and navigate our path and our journey. But as I've continued to live that experience, I believe a lot of it too is just in yourself. Is just kind of when you kind of get out of the idea that everything is outside of you and the opportunity is within you. I think that's when it can get pretty interesting on that side. And that was definitely mine. I mean, falling into the radio business when I was 16 years old, the very first thing I ever wrote to myself was like vision quest. Like I was on this quest to just kind of make it in this business. And then as I started kind of chipping away at myself more, because I ran into a lot of problems there. But what was interesting was I had no education. I had no network of people I could go to and say, hey, I want to work in a radio station. I had no formal education. I was still in high school at the time. But I just kind of had that intention, and it was very present for me. And I was able to put it out and kind of live it out loud to as many people that would listen to me. And suddenly kind of doors started opening. And before I knew it, at 16, I was working in a radio station. And then that was just kind of a stepping stone for me to start building a network and start meeting other people. And that opened other doors to get into bigger stations and bigger opportunities. And then all while that was happening, I just became a sponge. I said, I'm just going to learn everything I can because of this passion of mine. I just had this tremendous passion to communicate and to be a part of this business. And as much as I used to think radio was the end result, what I've come to realize is that really it was a broader passion around speaking and communication, and a lot of the things that, interestingly enough, when I was a kid, I had very low self-esteem. I wasn't a big talker. I didn't really speak to people a lot. And it was kind of fascinating that I believe that, your greatest purpose is also your greatest challenge. And here I was as a young kid wanting to be on radio, but barely, terrified to speak to people like in class and those type of things. And it ended up becoming just such a great passion of mine to realize that communication was the opportunity and this was the outlet to do it.
But now, like, you have, I guess the way I would think about it is you have people who have the passion you have, right? So there's, and I have a general notion, which is and I'm sure it's not mine personally, but I mean, it's something that I think anyway, whether or not I've heard it elsewhere or whether or not I manifest it myself. The idea of generally being, if you have nothing to lose, then you go for the stars. If you have a lot to lose, i.e., so if you're in essence, you're poor, you can reach for the stars because where are you going to land? Nowhere. You're going to land back where you are. So there's really nothing to lose. You don't have any assets tangibly. You don't have any finances that are going to change your outcome one way or the other. If you're middle class, you've acquired just enough where if you lose it, you fall literally into the poor realm, which you weren't before, or you can fall into the rich realm, which is where you want to be anyway. Not fall, you can grow into that, which you want to be. And if you're overly rich, you have a cushion, so you're never really going to fall one or the other, generally speaking. So risks, if you're rich, you can take risks. If you're poor, you can take risks. If you're middle class, you really can't. Right?
Right.
So with that being said, there's a lot of people people have, I mean, by default, the majority is middle class, who are, I would assume, loaded with passion for a variety of things, whether communication, whether entertainment, whether things that aren't standard, i.e. going into your standard 9-to-5 job or getting a salary job for the year, things of that nature, but are guided away from that towards consistency, towards correct, yeah, to do things that in essence will ensure the bills are paid so they can get a mortgage and so on and so forth, right? To kind of take away the risk out of things and to just be a cog in the wheel. I mean, maybe
Right.
a wealthy cog in the wheel. Don't get me wrong. You can make some money doing this. I'm not saying you won't live a decent financial life, but your life at work versus your passion are completely separate.
Yeah, and you're spot on there, right? Because I think for most people, it's about the fear and what is kind of our boundary, our threshold, our horizon for fear. I think in the conversations you and I have had previously, we've identified we both come from very humble beginnings, and for me that was very much the case. I grew up in a trailer park in North Carolina with a single mom and not a lot of money, and my negotiation with myself of following this radio dream, even though it seemed, enormous at the time, is, hey, if it all falls apart, I can always go back and live in that trailer with my mom. Like that was kind of my safety net, even though that was never the kind of comfort or safety that I wanted, but I knew it was there and it's what I knew. So I was always able to hold that very present for myself to say, it's there in case this falls apart. And that's, and I think for a lot of people, they do the same. It's comfort, it's safety, it's, whatever it may be. But in stepping out on your passion, that's why it has to be something deeper. That what is going to have you kind of step out of that comfort zone, so to speak, that great intention, that great passion, that great purpose. And I've spent pretty much my whole life kind of thinking a lot about that because the other side is, I did have the benefit of kind of rising and becoming very successful, and then kind of realizing, okay, well, this is it, kind of thing, and saying I want to do it again, and struggled and had things fall apart and life fall apart on me, and have some very bad things happen, but still believing that. You can still climb and do that passion job no matter what circumstance you come from, and that's why I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. To say, if you've always thought that you should be an attorney and you are an attorney, that's great. For a lot of people, that's enough. And if you're satisfied with that, then fantastic. Keep doing more of that. But like if you're like me, or I think like you, Amit, that thing kind of keeps poking you in the heart or tugging at your heartstrings to say, there's something else, there's something else, there's something else. I think, that is the moment to explore and to kind of look at yourself, because that's the very thing that will get you over the horizon, get you out of that comfort zone, get you out of that safety and that typical path to say, how can I be here in a new way? Because I've only looked at it kind of in this direction my whole life. And it's not about right or wrong. It just is to say, what can I do now to kind of be here in a new way? And typically what I find is that it's something about yourself that you are holding space or energy for, or a fear or whatever that's been sitting there all along, that you can address and really start to choose differently, just in simply making the choice to say, I'm not going to choose that today, and kind of see where it takes you. And that could be pretty interesting.
So then, well, all right. So along those lines, then, because you're saying that are do things that can positively affect your thought process, to kind of say, hey, these fears aren't are fears that can be surmounted, can be overcome, can be, I mean, in essence, can be put away. I mean, they don't have to be a fear. They are one now, but they shouldn't be, because of a variety of things in the world,
That's
right?
right.
And the reason I'm saying it that way is because and I don't know if this was the way you always were, or things along your life path have brought you here now, but you are a spiritual person. Is that fair to say? Somebody who is more, okay, there's a certain path, things, I mean, not somebody who's going to go, hey, it's going to work out the way it's supposed to work out, but somebody who's actually going out and impacting change, but utilizing spirituality and confidence within and things of that nature to accomplish that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of experience, of being, a marketing guy, of being a strategy nerd, of being a spiritual person. I think it all kind of plays into that, and I think the spiritual aspect for me is a chance to just kind of be open, and that's the way I look at it. Is a lot of times, because of our past, because of our nurture, nature, all those kind of things, we feel that it's always this way, and we kind of put ourselves in a box. And I certainly did that. But growing up and being in a box that I didn't really like, suddenly it was like, okay, well, is this? It just didn't seem that was the path I wanted to follow. I mean, I remember, my dad was a plumber. My mom worked in corporate America for AT&T, Southern Bell in the day. So I had two very different sides of it, and I went to work with both of them. And I decided that I didn't really like either one of those paths, really. But I was growing up in this kind of, lower middle class, maybe even worse once the divorce happened. And I decided that, if I'm going to make this something different, one, I have to just be open to kind of seeing where this experience will take me when I kind of step out of paths that most people would come and say, well, this is your path. I grew up in a high school that I wasn't a great student. And when I met with the guidance counselors and those type of folks, they were putting me in those nothing wrong with it, but those technical jobs I didn't want to be in. Oh, you'd be a great mechanic. Oh, you'd be a great auto body person. And as much as I took auto body in high school of all things. I loved doing that, but it was never something that had the passion for me to have a career. So I was willing to challenge myself and just spiritually be open to saying, I believe there's more. I have faith in myself and in something there's more. And I'm just going to kind of put myself out there and see where this takes me. And that was ultimately the part that I think made the biggest difference, even as simple as that sounds.
But what do you think causes that? Like, what do you think gives you this level of faith slash, whether it be confidence, whether it be faith, desire, whatever word you want to use, to go, hold up, there's more than being the auto body person? And correct me if I'm wrong, did you see other people who had accomplished certain things, who had come from similar places and going, oh, I can be, somebody else did it, why can't I? Or was this something that you just had internally?
Well, for me, the radio part was interesting because my mother had wanted to be in the radio business back at a time where there weren't a lot of females in the radio business. So she had talked to me about that. My mom was an operator for the telephone company, so communication kind of ran in the family. And my mom was one of those people that could talk to anyone, where I was the person that as soon as she would start talking to the stranger in the line at the grocery store, I would freeze up and think, oh my God, this is hell. So I think that influence was around me as well, which kind of gave me, that combination of seeing that and thinking, oh, this is kind of interesting. And my mom was a big music fan, as I was too. So we would do concerts, and there was a local radio station in my town that my mom was a fan of, and we would go out and see the main disc jockey personality guy would make appearances, and we would, I saw that a few times, and that certainly had influence on me. And I thought, man, that looks like a really fun job, and it seemed to have great alignment. And then with my mom saying, hey, you can do anything you put your mind to, I thought, well, I think I want to do that. And of course, everybody thought, there's no way, it's crazy. I even had a high school sweetheart whose dad sat me down and said, hey, let's talk serious, because you seem to be spending way too much time on this radio idea. But it just was such a fire inside of me that I knew at that point, I chose it, and I chose it again and again and again. And I said, if I don't make it, I'm going to die trying. And it just, I took it from there. I opened myself up, and it became just an experience that, as I look back, 30 years now, I'm like, I can't imagine any of that ever happening when I was standing as a 16-year-old.
So, okay, so then now you look at Sammy in present day. You've done the radio thing, you still are passionate about it, but have worked in it, was an on-air personality, you've got friends in the podcasting game now, which is something similar, I guess. You work in entertainment on a different side of the business now, but you've done everything at all the big radio stations possible, the marketing aspect, etc. So you, in essence, have lived out various aspects of your passion, your dream, etc. that you had when you were a kid. So you've seen it through fruition, based on whatever internal drive you had. And even though people said no and you shouldn't do this, or it's just foolish, or whatever it may be, now you have kids. Right. So practically, parents want kids to go to good schools, you go to good college, so on and so forth, and then you want them to be happy, but you want them to be self-sufficient, right? And those two aren't necessarily related. I mean, happiness and financial sufficiency are not necessarily one and the same, and especially if somebody wants to be an artist, things of that nature, that there aren't a guarantee. If you make it, oh, it's beautiful. You've got wealth and you've got whatever, and you can truly enjoy your art. If you don't make it, then you have, you've life may be a little different, difficult or otherwise, etc. So now you've got kids, right?
Yep.
How do you try to instill the same, or is it something you can instill, or is it something innate? Like, how do you go to your kids and be like, hey, I did all the things, and as a parent, do you want them to take all these risks?
Yeah, and I think the question begets a question for me because I think success is defined by each. It's defined by our society. But it's interesting. We have a friend that my oldest son is a musician, or he was for a while, and the guy that managed the band, his name was Bill, and Bill was just this lifelong musician, followed his passion, drummer. And you would probably look at his life and say, from a financial standpoint, I don't know anything about his finances, but he probably wasn't filthy rich. In the definition of success in our world as a musician, he wasn't. He wasn't out there with gold records and the kind of success that some musicians has. But if you talk to Bill, he was one of the most successful guys you'd ever meet. He was following his passion, and when he was sitting behind a drum set, I mean, the guy would volunteer at the school. He was teaching drum lessons to kids. He was picking up gigs on the weekends with bands that would come in and out of town. He was a studio musician, and his definition of success was just incredible. And he passed away last week, which was like, oh, big bummer. But, as I look, the thing that really struck me about, the success question is Bill had a form of cancer that he had beaten, and it essentially came back again. And what really struck me of watching this journey in the last month or so is that it came back, and there was kind of an announcement made, and suddenly someone started a Facebook page about, I think it was called the Bill Report or something like that. And every single day there were updates about Bill. And as I looked at that page, I was blown away of the hundreds of people that would post daily on that page to Bill. It was like a living memorial going on. And Bill would say, hey, I just came back and got this doctor's report, and I think I need a great song today. And suddenly 50 people would post a YouTube video or some type of music that was just amazing. And I thought, and it really made me look and say, what is success, right? Because I think a lot of us in the traditional, especially Western sense, say, well, we all want to be comfortable. We all want to have money to do the things that we want to do. We all want to, of course, give our kids great educations and all those things. But to me, a part of that is that success means something to different to every single person. I think the very world we live in today, our kind of whole consciousness is expanding. That kind of be here in a new way theme is really around me. And I think it speaks to this very question, because what I would say to my kids is, yes, I want all those things for you. I want you to be comfortable, happy, successful, and to live the life that you want to live. But all I can do is plant the seeds in them to follow that same idea of put your mind to something and go after it, and know that they will have to discover it on their own. The hardest thing to do as a parent is watching your kids fall on their face, but understanding that it's absolutely a part of the condition and the human condition. Because even times when I try to say, hey, you shouldn't do that, they'll look at me and go, Dad, you have no idea what you're talking about. So I have to really watch anyway, and they fall on their face, and then say, okay, well, I probably could have saved you about 20 minutes there, but it's all a part of the experience.
But that's okay. But now that speaks to it as well, right? So you have parents innately want their kids to be happy. As a non-parent, this is my general assumption from parents want, right? That is in essence the goal. With that being said, parents also have a vision for what they want their kids to be. Yeah. By that I mean as individuals, as career-wise, and so on and so forth. Not necessarily I want my kid to be a doctor, lawyer, etc., but I want my kid to be both financially and emotionally happy and successful. Right? Now that's very easy for people to say. It's a very easy goal by way of stating such goal. The accomplishment or the attainment of such a goal is very difficult, if not. I mean, it's out of a parent's hands.
Oh, yeah. Well, and plus, I mean, I think a lot about, too, I think a part of an experience in life, and I think about this a lot, is, I tell this story many times, and I think I've told it to you before, is, when I started in the radio business, I was trying to live the life. Here I was, a young kid moving away from home, I wasn't making any. I was making less than $20,000 a year. It wasn't a lot of money, and I was trying to go to the dinners and hang out at the bar, and I was driving a new car, and I kind of got caught up in the world a bit on that side. And I remember having a morning where I was doing a morning show in Roanoke, Virginia, and I was prepping. I was doing news that day, and I was prepping to do the news, and the guy that was doing overnights on the radio station ran in and said, "Hey, your car is being towed out of the parking lot right now." It was being repossessed because I couldn't keep up with my bills. And as hard as that was, as embarrassing as that was, I look back on those moments now and think, when I was growing up and things did get very tight, my family, we always found a way. When I was living alone, I always found a way. When I've made a tremendous amount of money, the, the difference is that seeing it at all those levels, I realized that my greatest intention never changed, no matter depending on my bank account. I always was having fun. I was connecting with people. I was living a passion and a purpose. I may have had to be a little more frugal about it in some ways than I was when I was an executive versus being that kid starting out or losing everything. But at the very heart of it, nothing changed. And that's kind of the message I want to give to my kids is, of course, I want all those things for them. I think, and not just as a parent, but as a person, I want that for everybody on this planet. I wish the best for everyone. If you want to make a lot of money, I'm like, great, you should make a lot of money. If you want to have a lot of friends, you should have a lot of friends. But I think the choice is up to each of us. And that's why I say, if you kind of make this greater, deeper intention, the thing that's present in every moment, the thing that gives you the very freedom and gives others freedom in that interaction with you, I think it will connect in those other ways. It's when you say it's all about the money, it's all about the role, it's all about the status, that there's going to be a lot of pain and discomfort that goes on there, because that's hard to maintain if you're not passionate on the other side and doing something that you're jumping out of bed really in love with every single day.
But then, okay, so how many people? But in general, again, based on society and where we live and stuff like that, if you're coming from a place where you're like, I want to accomplish passion, joy, love, etc. Myself in the same boat. I wanted a lot of things that many of which I've accomplished. I never thought I would, and the other parts that I haven't accomplished, I've kind of gone on a different path. Like in essence, that was a goal, and then it's no longer a goal. Life is kind of taking me a different way.
That's what
But
happens.
success in the same realm comes down to, now, success is a very loose term. Let me take that back. Instead of success, being able to afford yourself the opportunities to do the things you want to do comes down to finances. Well, for me, I'll put it that way, right? I'm not going to put that on other people. For me, right? So if I want to go travel, or want to see things, I want to experience things, right? I mean, I'm not buying a new car or whatever, but just just living things out, whatever, comes down to finances. So there's that fine balance between, I need this much money, but I
Yeah.
want to be this happy.
Yeah.
And getting them both is not an easy task at all. And on the flip side, you have, no matter how much you try to get away from it, I think society still has its goal. There's that. If I used to have a Honda Civic for, well, I had three Honda Civics, right, which I loved each one, and mileage good, gas good, etc., and did everything I needed the car to do. But at some point, as a 30-odd-year-old guy, I can't pull up to. I can, but if I were to go out on a date in the Honda Civic, now independent of what my bank account has, the fact that I'm in that car, there's an
Right.
immediate. I'm being judged automatically. I mean, you're being judged regardless for a lot of things in the world, but that's an immediate way to judge where I fall in the ranks of society by way of accomplishment, as a
Yeah,
general term.
and let me say two things to that. One is money is great energy. There's no question about that. But there is, if your passion, and this is the part of like faith and trusting yourself and letting go to really follow the hunch and those clues to see where it takes you, right? Of knowing, and I try to kind of dive deeper, and I'll give you the two questions to dive deeper on what I believe can help uncover intention. But um, a great example of you got to have money to travel and all those things is not necessarily true. I could prove you wrong about that because I think that, like, look at the phenomenon. I'm fascinated right now by the phenomenon of YouTube, which is a big part of what we're doing today, right? My kids are big fans of the game Minecraft, and I'm fascinated that. That there's a couple of guys and girls on YouTube now that they will have YouTube videos of simply them playing the game.
Mhm.
And what those simple concepts of following passion has done is one of the guys travels the world to they fly him all over the world to play this game at conventions and all those places, and it's probably not a direct correlation of him making, say, $100,000 a year as much as him doing what he loves, and companies and people and organizations showing up saying, okay, we may not pay you $100,000 to do this, or maybe they will at some point, but I tell you what, all expense travel on us to come and do this someplace else. When I was in the radio business early on, you just reminded me of this in our conversation. I remember in one of my earliest jobs, they didn't pay me a lot of money, and I remember once the kind of yearly annual review thing came around, and they said to me, they said, look, we don't have the budget to pay you any more money. They said, but you know what, in radio, one of the things we do is we trade services all the time. We'll give commercials for other services. And they said, as a matter of fact, I want you to tell us something that you need. Oh, well, I really need a new car. They said, well, you know what? We have a great relationship with a car dealer in town. And as a matter of fact, we'll make that your bonus for this year. We'll give you the car and we'll take care of that through just running commercials for them. So there's a lot of ways to find that freedom,
Mm-hmm.
finance side, without being direct correlation to the X's and O's of those numbers. So that's the aspect on that side. And then the other part, the Honda Civic, which is a great part of myself, is that's something for you to explore on your own side, because judgment is very real. Don't get me wrong. People are judged every single day. One of my other podcaster friends I was speaking with just earlier today, and it's funny because she's had such momentum around her podcast recently. And in the last several weeks, I've noticed that she's posted, there seemed to be a lag. And I was like, I wonder what's going on with her. So I texted her earlier today and said, hey, let's catch up. And she wrote me, and it was interesting how this is the very thing that she had gotten caught up in. She said, my brother thinks it needs this kind of structure, and my former colleague at a radio station thinks we need to be selling it this way. And suddenly all the judgment of her own success she was getting caught up into. And what I said to her I said, this has nothing to do about anything, which I'm going to now say to you, Amit, I said, this has everything with you choosing no and not choosing yes. Most people think because of the outside influence, we simply have to say yes. But I've met people before that could drive up in the crappiest shit on the planet, walk it up to the valet, and have the same pride as the guy with the freaking Bentley. So I think it's all a matter, again, of choice and looking at yourself to say, if it's important to you, fantastic. I'm not judging it myself because I know that's a part of the world. But what I would challenge you on is to say, why is the judgment so important? Because I think if you can look at that, you may find that be here in a new way kind of opening for yourself to say, that would be the very thing I would challenge you to say, show up with the Civic on the date and get the reaction and have a great laugh about it.
Ah, wow. All right. I think we're gonna cut it short on that note there. That's been taking half an hour of your time, but that's a great couple questions to end it with. In general, is wow. That's I will think about that.
Yes, let me just say one thing because I promised to do this. So let's
Yeah.
close the loop. I said I'm going to give you those two questions, which I do to everyone. I say intention is the greatest thing. Create an intention that gives you freedom, right? And gives others freedom. Create a purpose that builds confidence in yourself and others. Create a connection that builds a choice for yourself and others. That's kind of a framework you can use. And what I always say is, with intention, think about really 2 to 3 questions. Think about, what do you value most when others do it for you? Those things, think about that consistent theme that shows up for you that you said, man, I connect with those people. And what are you valued most for in others? There's something there. And what do you find of great value in the struggle? there's a struggle that you've been going on that you continue to struggle with over and over again, but there's something you're valuing about it. And within those three things, if you can really just sit down and write those kind of things out, just do a brain dump with yourself and start to find the consistent theme, you may find there's a great intention that's been living in your life probably since you knew it. And it's a great opportunity.
I appreciate that,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping people who watch this will take that challenge as well and
Me.
ask themselves the same question. Thank you very much for the Sunday afternoon. I appreciate it. Now you got to get to your stuff. Thank you for the time, sir. And I will see you for a beer soon enough.
All right. Be good.
Have a good one, man. Enjoy the day. Stay warm.
Bye.
Bye, Sammy.